to hear our fellows speak today.
Patricia, will you please show us your face?
Oh. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Right.
Okay. So Kathy, why don't you go ahead and introduce our speakers today, and let's get the program started.
Okay, very good. Hi, I'm Kathy Trevino. I'm a member of the Interbranch Council, and that includes the Camarillo branch of AAUW, as well as Thousand Oaks branch and Simi Valley branches. And I'm really excited to introduce our first speaker. She's doing amazing things you're going to really want to hear about. Heather Ives has an AAUW Career Development Grant in Health and Medical Sciences, working toward her master's in public health through the University of Nevada at Reno. Heather transitioned to a career in science in 2016 through a STEM career education program at the community college. She's now a faculty member in the same program, helping students build their STEM careers. While earning a master's in public health, Heather is also implementing a college food security resource program for Richmond Promise in Northern California. She's working towards reducing inequities and ensuring access to basic needs, which will lead to improved health outcomes for college students. We'll take questions through the chat after Heather is through talking, and I am pleased to present Heather Ives.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all for having me and inviting me to speak. It is my pleasure. And this is my fifth, I think, fourth, maybe fifth. So it's been a really great year, and I've just been so happy with the invitations to come just kind of spread the word about the work that I'm doing, and then also just make it more normalized and just more. I'm on mute, right? And you can see the screen here. Okay, yes. Great. So I call it stepping into equity work. The first talk I gave to is the Northern Peninsula up here in Northern California. And they were having an equity talk. And I was like, well, that's kind of what I did, was stepped into it. It was, just how I ended up. So as Kathy said, I'm a career grant recipient for this year and a grad student. And I'm the co-director now of the bioscience department. So the talk I like to give is sort of twofold, just my sort of journey, which kind of informs a lot of, it's part of what I'm doing for my public health. So there's the food resources program, but there's also helping people change their careers, which is why I sort of stuck with this program and saw what it did for me and how it can help other people, and how I can turn that into just making real change in this field, the STEM field. So in 2016, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I entered the career training program at Merritt College. I had a background previously in sales and property management, but I was an advertising salesperson down in LA for the LA Daily News and the San Fernando Valley Business Journal. So I was just south of you guys, like, right? Yeah, that's south, right? It is. Right. Yeah. And so then I decided to come up here, start a family. Then after I finished that program, I got 2 prestigious academic research internships at Gladstone Institutes and Chan Zuckerberg Biohub. And that was sort of what launched my career. And I landed a dream job that I currently still have at UC Berkeley as a research associate in the Molecular Imaging Center as a microscopist. At the same time, I became an instructor's assistant in the Merritt Bioscience Department, as I was still earning the 2 years work requirement that is required to become a faculty member. In 2019, I started my master's of public health. And then in 2019, I became an adjunct professor in the bioscience department, as I had gained 2 years of the experience. Plus they accepted my teaching experience in Korea as well. So that was great. Then this past academic year, I went into planning and implementing the food resources program. And then I was promoted to the histotechnician program director and the co-director of the Merritt Bioscience Department. If you don't know what a histotechnician is, what they take biopsies from our cancers, from our liver, from any condition or any potential tissue disease we have, and they take it and process it and stain it so that the pathologist can do a diagnosis. So it's an allied health profession that has a certification. So it gets people into really well-paying jobs in clinics and in academic research. Let me go on to the next slide. So I run 3 programs: microscopy, histotechnology, and there's a genomics program as well. Trainees go on to work in hospitals, academia, and industry. And the starting pay for our histotechnician trainees when hired as histotechnicians is anywhere from 65 to 90 grand, depending on what current degree they have and if they are certified or non-certified. I have lots of students who come in unemployed, who are or making $15 an hour, who double their income or go from having no income to, changing their whole income from 0 to 70, 80 grand a year. After a year of training, average research associate that goes through our program ends up making about 50 grand. Entry-level lab assistants and tech start out $18 to $22 an hour. And many of the trainees come to our program with bachelor's science degrees to receive technical hands-on training that they don't get in their 4-year degree. And other non-degree trainees come through with they get the full spectrum of training, which includes soft skills, those really, communication and troubleshooting and all those things that aren't technical, presentation skills and critical thinking. So I've got a really solid program that trains and changes the trajectory of our students' lives. This is the makeup of my department. So we had about 25% of my most recent cohort identified as Black or African American, and that was partly in part for me creating a video that told my story, that also brought in a lot of women over the age of 35, 40, who were thinking that like a career transition was not something that they, was the right time for them, but it increased our age group. As you can see here, we have 17% of our group is over 40, and then coupled with over 35 to 40, we have 30% of our cohort. 85% identify as women. And I like to say that we are a safe space for women and women of color who want to come in and make that career change. What we are currently finding is that the field is not as welcoming. So that's a new thing that I'm going to have to start tackling with our employers. Like, we're touting this wonderful field and some of us have great experiences, but at sometimes we are coming up against at workplaces that are not as friendly as we need our students to they're not as inclusive, they're not as accessible as we want them to be. So we're working on that. Again, I do all of this equity asking of questions like, are you ready for online learning? Or do you have childcare issues? Do you have transportation? All of these things to make it so that the students know we care about their experience in our program. And that, and so not everyone is doing this. Not everyone as faculty is letting students know that we are aware that these are the issues that you're going to come up against. And these are the reasons why you may drop our program. So by asking, we are reducing the stigma, and we are saying, hey, if you come up against these issues, let me know. Let's find some resources together so that maybe of the 3 or 4 things you have going on, you don't drop this one and maybe you choose something else because I care. Okay. And it's one of the many things. I need to work. I don't have childcare, transportation, something. A lot of our students have to choose something, they have to give up something. So we want to be a part of the solution and not just have them disappear, but keep the conversation open so that they come back. So now I'm going to transition to the other part. So that's kind of why I got the career grant, because of that work that I'm doing. But then in addition to this additional work that I'm doing for my Master of Public Health. So this is for my master's, we have to do field studies where we, anything we're passionate about. And I was already a mentor with the Richmond Promise, and I'm from Richmond, California. So when they were asking for mentors, I was like, oh, of course I'll mentor someone. So I've had my mentor for 2 years now, and she's going on to become a nurse. She starts at USF, University of San Francisco, later this year. So, we like to say that food insecurity amongst our college students, it's just a gentler way of saying, or less a euphemism for saying that our college students are poor and they're having to make choices that are, the problem basically. I'm moving this thing around, but you guys can see the screen no matter where I've put you all. Okay, good. Nearly 40,000 students from 57 California community colleges participated in the HOPE survey in the fall of 2016 and 2018. And the assessment found that 52% of students worried their food would run out before they could get money to buy more. 49% cannot afford to eat balanced meals, and 41% cut the size of meals or skip meals due to lack of money for food. So part of that is, while this was a survey done by the Hope Center, which is out of, I can only say, I'm drawing a blank, but it's with Dr. Sarah Goldrick Rab, and this is her whole specialty is making people understand the basic needs issues that are not being met for college students. While tuition has remained low at our community colleges, it is still difficult for most lower income students to achieve their educational goals due to their state's higher cost of living, California, and the lack of adequate financial aid to cover non-tuition expenses such as food. Food insecure students in particular are more likely to indicate intention dropping out of school and less likely to feel confident in their academic abilities. Therefore, they may be forced to delay their education to make ends meet, setting them up for a cycle of poverty that can be increasingly difficult to break. So this was before COVID too, right? So a lot has come in that's, we had that very rough 2020, and then we had some changes to the administration, and now more resources are being introduced to help people. Doesn't mean the issue has gone away, but there new issues arise, of course. So a national effort is necessary to eliminate hunger as a barrier to student success and degree attainment. I just like to include this slide because we all want to be up here, where we have we're self-fulfillment, our needs, we're achieving our full ability. But if we don't have these basic needs met, it's really hard to get to the top of that pyramid. So food, water, warmth, and rest. So if we're housing deprived or food deprived, we're going to struggle with, self-actualization, achieving our full potential. So what do I say here? Okay, what students say. So part of this whole thing was finding out what do students have to say about food resources and food insecurity. And one of them is stigma. And then one of them is just students are hungry and ashamed to ask for help, even from other parents. These parents are not rich or often and are often poor, but even when the parents are not poor, students still don't want to burden their parents. They just want to they have a lot of pride and they want to prove they can do it on their own. Navigating available resources is confusing, even for non-students. It's very confusing. Even now with the change in administration and the change in things supposedly becoming easier, it's still complicated somehow. There's still barriers, there's still phone calls, it's like trying to, I don't know if any of you know anybody going through the EDD process, but getting someone on the phone, but I'm sure you've heard of it, the unemployment line, very challenging to get through. Poor students are too busy to eat even the little bit of food they have. They are in school full-time and working multiple part-time jobs. They simply forget to eat, and when they get on campus food is often overpriced and thus not affordable. Students are earning income through sex work to pay for food. And students think, this is very helpful for me, and this is why I've changed how I go about assessing needs in my class. Students think it would be helpful if professors included a basic needs resources statement in their syllabi, and this opens the door to the conversation about their hunger and other needs. It lets the student know the professor cares. And I have taken this to my whole campus, and I'm trying to, as part of our equity push, and I don't know if you've heard of guided pathways, but I'm the faculty lead on my campus, and it's supposed to make students entering the path of college all the way the whole path through the end, exiting the path. And part of that is getting faculty to change their mindset on their role in student success. So I'm working on that. So more, what else contributes to the problem? A complicated SNAP application. You must work part-time at least 20 hours per week. Some students know how to get around this rule by just saying they babysit or other things. Other students think it has to be a hardcore 20-hour-a-week job where you prove, with a stub, a pay stub. And then additionally, with the previous administration, you had to, actually, I don't know if you've heard of the public charge rule, but the public charge rule said that if you had too many, if you as somebody who was waiting for to change your status, your green card status to permanent, and you had too many federal resources, or you were using too many federal resources, public charge, the judge would deny you. And so before the Trump administration, this did not include food. And under his administration, it was set to include food. Then the pandemic happened. And then September of last year, they were moving on with food. So I'm still, this is where I'm confused. And a lot of the people who do this work all the time are still confused about where we stand with the public charge rule. Like, it should just be, the food part should just be completely with, like, it should not include food. But that isn't going to stop the people who need the help from thinking that it is going to count toward their 36. I think it's out of 3 years, you used a year's worth of services or something. It's not going to stop them from, it's going to stop them from applying because they're just confused about it, or they're like, no, it's going to change and they're going to count it against me. So they're not going to seek the help that they need. And then as college students have gotten Blacker and browner and more non-male, federal support for college has declined. Okay, so these are all sort of contributing to the problem. So this slide I have on here, we did pass this from the last time I did this in January. We did get the 1.9 trillion recovery thing bill, and it included money for community college and HBCUs and more minority serving institutions, which has been a boost and a boom. It doesn't mean that, you know, hunger has gone away. We do know that emergency aid, SNAP, and other public health benefits such as access to childcare can increase a student's financial stability and improve a student's likelihood of completing college degrees or certificates. So we just need to continue on the path that we're on. But the new challenges, of course, are still going to be educating students on the resources available to them, because now I know that people are still confused about what's the $3,000 tax credit for children. Like, there's still confusion about all the things, and the confusion will prevent you from applying for something if it's hard to navigate. And the stigma, actually asking for help. So my goal, so after interviewing the students and other stakeholders, and with the changing administration, some of my project priorities have changed, and they include creating an early intervention program at the Richmond Promise that prepares students and helps them to navigate their basic needs resources on the campuses and tackle stigma head on. So rather than you having to go to, you know, being a Richmond Promise scholar and you're at UC Davis or UC Berkeley and you go to their website and you have to like kind of look around for who to contact about what, it will live on the Richmond Promise website, and they will have training from the Richmond Promise on what to expect, because a lot of it is they don't know what to expect when they embark on their SNAP application, or when they embark on, you know, who to reach out to. It's like, give them a primer on how it all works, what to expect, what's available, and then they go out and do it. And then in-house research too, but the organization can only do so much. These are UC Davis, UC Berkeley, and the different community colleges in the area are big organizations that have a lot of resources. They're just challenging to navigate. You have community college websites that are under, that have too little information. And you have, you know, some college websites that have a lot of information that's just hard to navigate. The best website I have found, and I'm not biased at all, but is San Francisco State University's website for basic needs. And it's run by everyone has an MPH or a public health degree. So they have this lens that they create things through that just speaks to, you know, it's all about navigation and access and clarity and how things make sense to people who are seeking information. Normalizing, and one of my priorities, normalizing utilizing resources. So from one of the things I got from the person at San Francisco State who runs the basic needs, she was like, a student said, CalFresh is just financial aid for food. CalFresh is what we call the SNAP benefits, the food stamps benefits that we have, you know, it's just financial aid for food. If you get financial aid from tuition, it's okay to seek financial aid for food as well. You know, it's just, that's all it is. And interpreting everything that is happening at the federal level. Again, that is key to understanding what is going on. Is there still the public charge rule? Like, you know, there's this new thing where your parents' income does not determine your eligibility for SNAP now. So it's like, okay, that's a huge factor too. And then providing the Richmond Promise leadership with enough data and information to advocate for policy changes at the local, state, and federal level. And in October 2020, which was really cool, the Richmond Promise partnered with the City of Richmond and the National League of Cities in DC and 12 other cities to form the community of practice on addressing the basic needs of post-secondary students. And a lot of the data that I had put together and acquired in the first 100 hours of this project, my preceptor was able to use for her application to being one of these cities and to form me their strategic plan over the next 3 years for implementing this kind of initiative. That's pretty exciting. So the work that I've been doing has already been kind of helpful to my organization. And then, so if you want to learn more, and so my biggest thing about coming to speak to groups is just awareness, you know, it's letting you know this is an issue. There are more places to learn about it. So Hungry to Learn is a free, it's a documentary that is produced by Soledad O'Brien, and you can find it at tinyurl.com/hungrysoledad. Just easy to find that way. And it just kind of goes in depth on this issue. It follows 3 students and their stories. The Hope Center's latest survey, you can find it at tinyurl.com. I'll send this to you. Hunger during pandemic. Just kind of did a snapshot of the hunger crisis during the pandemic. And then the Biden American Rescue Plan, which has been passed. I crossed out the bipartisan support thing that they gave up on, I believe. Okay, and then my acknowledgements and just any questions that you have about my career transition or the food resources program, I am happy to answer now. And thank you. You may hear my daughter in the background. I can't hear anybody. Let me see, are there questions in the chat? No. So.
Actually, I do have a question, Feather. I'm sorry.
Who is that? Let me
This
see.
is B. Luderbeck, and I was just choking on a swallow of tea. That's why I was hesitating. I don't know if I have, let me swallow one more. Your talk is very, very helpful to me because it has enlightened me to a situation that I've been involved with. My church has been sort of asked to support a family of now 6. The parents were farm workers. The mother died of COVID in February, and the father's disabled. So there are children, 6 children, I believe it is, who need resources. Where I'm going with this is we've all been involved, and I've connected with our local Ventura County Community Foundation that has funding for the situation that she's in briefly. And we've reached out to her. The CEO from the foundation has reached out to the 21-year-old daughter who is a Cal State Channel Islands student. She's now the major wage earner. She's had to drop classes. And where I'm going with this is we've reached out and said, this foundation has funding to help you. We have resources, we're connected. And she says, great, but then she doesn't follow up. And I'm beginning to understand from what you just presented, which has been so helpful, there's probably lots of dimensions. I did hear one time that she feels overwhelmed by the paperwork. So I've volunteered to help with the paperwork. But if you have maybe some insight or some wisdom, because there's several of us at church who are inputting, I'm connecting with this foundation and other medical resources, but we're so many people, I don't want to be an extra person to say, hey, I can help. But we're kind of stuck with like, there's funding, there's help, and we know that she's just lost her mom in February. We know she's overwhelmed. And so if you have any wisdom as how we can best support this young woman on her journey without overwhelming her, confusing.
Has her only thing that, thank you for sharing that. That sounds pretty typical. Has her only feedback been about the paperwork, or has it been that, Is she know anybody in the process? Is it her church? Is it she go to your
No,
church?
It's not. She, I'll back up. She's been referred to MyCop, which is a local organization for field workers and their families.
Okay.
And the difficulty I'm in is I'm not one of the persons who's in direct contact with her. And
Yeah.
my worry is that whoever's talking to her is not articulating in a way that's being receptive. And if I take it on, from what you've said, I think first normalizing that it's okay to ask for this help.
Yep.
And I'll defer to what you were starting to ask me.
Well, I mean, I think it may be who does she know very well? Because I think oftentimes in situations, people want to work with people they know, right? You know, who they're close to, especially in certain cultures and communities. And you know, you might, if she has sort of for lack of a better word, a social worker who she's working with, someone who you can work with and say, hey, I'm willing to do this to help. That might be, and you know, it's about trust. I'm not saying she wouldn't trust you if you were to introduce her, but you know, that might be an approach. It's one thing we don't. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead and finish.
No,
we did hear that she has a case manager from MyCop, but we don't know the extent of that involvement. And the family was actually referred to a group of us at church because we've worked before with an organization called Friends of Field Workers.
Yeah.
And Judy, who's in charge of it, said, and their organization deals with about 27 families. And she said, could you please take this on and adopt this family? So we're happy to do that. But it's like, I want to go, there's so much help and so much money to help you right now.
So we can talk because I would love to know what adopting the family means and what that looks like. And then that social worker who she's working with probably has a lot of cases, and people get lost, you know, especially right now. There are lots of people in need right now. So if this one person is like any other place that I work at, one person for 2,700 students at my school, one counselor for like 1,700 students rather. That's a lot of people per one person, and then just things don't get done. So if we can look at what the adoption process, what it means to adopt that family, and you know, really, you know, envelop them into, you know, this new kind of adopted church, you know, that process. But we can explore that, and I'll put my email here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd love to.
I don't want to take too much time from the meeting, but I was going, I think
there's a way.
What some of the resistance might be.
There's a lot of money that gets unused. There's so much money because 1, the stigma, 2, people don't know, 3, it's just too much work, and 4, it's just another thing that people have to do. And it's like, I'm tired, you know, like.
Well, she's become the sole wage earner for the family. She's working a part-time job. Anyway, thank you so much for your input. I appreciate it.
Heather, there's a question. Can you say a bit more about the workplace barriers students are facing in the program you were describing?
Okay, thank you for asking that. So it's the program, we're a very anti-racist program. I teach anti-racism, I teach, you know, environmental justice. My job, people go make 6 figures because people have cancer. You got to know why people have cancer for you to be able to celebrate going out and get a 6-figure job, in my opinion. You have to know why disproportionate rates of cancer are in certain communities. That just only makes sense to me as a public health person. Like, I'm teaching you how to do this job, but there are reasons why the cancer rates are going up so high. You know, yes, people are aging, but also there are other things too. So let's talk about that. What's happening is there's just, there are cliques in labs. There's just systemic racism in labs. There's systemic racism in the workplace. And so when we have a diverse student population and we're like, we're going to help you get these shiny jobs, and then you go to that job and you're not in such a welcoming environment. So our goal now, and I have a lot of the faculty in our group work in some of these clinics and labs, is to find out, what is Kaiser? What is this company? What is this hospital? What are you guys doing for its anti-racism and inclusive and accessibility and belonging in your organization that we're sending our students to? we create these employees that you guys hire. We need you to do better. So we're working on what that means right now, how we have that conversation with these kind of larger organizations. So does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Yes, thank
But
you.
yeah,
I
that's
was
it.
also going to say, you're in Northern California, and we have some amazingly powerful AAUW branches in California. In the East Bay. I think if you connect with them, you're going to get some ladies knocking on some doors and doing some face-to-face stuff.
Okay. I
So
will be in touch. It's you know, I've got a lot to sort going on with my mom going on now. So it's like I am trying to get back into it. So everything's kind of on, like, even my food resources is just on hold just a little bit till everything I get back into a routine. So I appreciate it, but I'm ready when things kind of calm down to get back and, you know, continue with this work. But
well, I think I will look through the state website that's online and send you some choice names and email addresses.
Awesome.
Well, a lot of us are former educators up to probably 12th grade, maybe a couple in the higher levels, but the social emotional development of our students has always been so important. But I have not seen that except for with you at the, you know, the post high school level. And that's so important.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
still developing and changing careers. And it's so wonderful that you are doing that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. If no further questions, okay, let's go on to our next lady here. Thank you, Feather. Okay, we have Ms. LaToya Council, who is currently working toward her PhD in sociology and is under an AAUW American Fellowship at USC, go Trojans, in Los Angeles, sponsored in part by the Thousand Oaks 30th Anniversary Fellowship. And by the way, I forgot to mention that Feather is being sponsored in part by Simi Valley and Camarillo branches, which is one of the reasons that we asked her to speak. I apologize for missing that. LaToya's specialty is gender, work, health, and intersectionality, which she'll explain. LaToya's work examines how Black couples manage work and family demands within the context of gendered racism. She's measuring time management and self-care practices in her subjects. And we will also entertain questions afterward. And I am pleased to present to you LaToya Council.
Thank you, Kathy. I will go ahead, share my screen. Can everyone see that well? Okay, I will get started. So good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by extending a warm thank you to Kathy Trevino, the Ventura County Interbranch Council, and the Camarillo, Simi Valley, and Thousand Oak chapters of AAUW for this opportunity to discuss my research. Aligning with today's theme, intersectionality, making a place for all, I will present on middle-class Black mothers' experiences with work and family life and its intersection with race, class, and gender. And the title of my talk today is Her Work, Picking Up the Slack and Caring for Them. In April, my inbox was flooded with Ms. Magazine's current issue, and the image that's on the screen is a Black mother with multiple arms like an octopus working to figure out how to manage it all. Career, motherhood, we can presume or not presume romantic partnering, and personal care. This iconic image exemplifies the complexity of women's lives since the groundbreaking book, The Feminine Mystique, which was released in 1963 by Betty Friedan. Except this time, the woman leading the conversation regarding work and family life is a woman of color, specifically a Black woman. I emphasize this because the research agenda regarding work and family life in 2021 overwhelmingly focuses on the experiences of white middle-class women with work and family, and de-emphasizing women of color's experiences. And this contributes to the pay, work, and family policies that upholds the interests of one group of women while marginalizing a diverse group of women, women of color. That said, the research question guiding my work on middle-class Black mothers seeks to understand how the social identities of mother, wife, or some of my participants were cohabiting partners, career women intersect with racial identity, gender, and class to inform a social group's experiences with work and family life. I interviewed 25 mothers, their male partners, as well as conducted 25 couple interviews to answer my research questions. And some findings that I have noticed in Black women's experiences with work and family life are interconnected with gendered racism at work, their and their partners' experiences, and gender inequality in the division of household labor. Gendered racism is the intersection of gender, race, and class in Black women's and men's lives, meaning how they're all operating at the same time, which is the core of intersectionality theory, and how racial identity, gender, and class structure experiences with social institutions, such as work life, family life, and romantic partnering. The racism Black women and men experience in public life produces outcomes patterned by gender, which is how we get to gendered racism. Aligning with this, I find that Black middle-class mothers experience gendered racism at work. And while they must find ways to manage and cope with their personal experiences, they are doing so in relation to their male partners' experiences with gendered racism at work, financial stress, and mothers sometimes respond by taking on more of the emotional and actual labor of the home, which mostly centers on childcare and some housework. I call this response by mothers piling on, which is the process of adding more labor to a schedule of never-ending work, childcare, and housework demands. I guess we can say today, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Wow to Betty Friedan for catching on in 1963. So gendered racism at work. While middle-class Black women discuss creating strategies to deal with microaggressions like with work colleagues, the strategies that they're contending is to combat the use of racialized and coded suggestions of one-dimensional Black experiences. So these ideas of you will be the speaker of what happens or is the experience of all Black people, which is a very emotional and laborious task to have to take on. Or sometimes Black women, and my respondents spoke of the Black tax, or having to do more work in order to prove that they're capable of doing their jobs. And I will show an example of both in the quotes following. So in this first quote, Candace, who's 45, married with 2 children, and a director of marketing in Virginia, she describes how microaggressions occur in the workplace and the strategies she uses to ensure she is not read as the angry Black woman by her colleagues. So she says, there was an email chain with our boss who was asking for recommendations for a song that will be playing when he went on stage for this event. This peer wrote in the email chain, well, why don't you ask Candace to teach you the dance that goes with this rap song? And he put in the link to this YouTube video. It was stereotypically ratchet. And I kind of took offense to that and wrote back, well, why are you suggesting that I know who this is and what this is? And he stumbled over email. I'm not the Black music encyclopedia around here, so let's not do that. The next day, it got back to me that he was not understanding why that was an issue. I just approached him and said, look, you don't have to understand why that is an issue. Just don't do it again and we'll be cool. I must address these issues or I can't sleep at night. I listened to my colleagues, my peers, and they were the ones who jumped in, not on the email chain, but to me. I often have people around me that validate when I hear something that sounds off, but I can't be the angry Black woman. You know what I mean? Next, in terms of the Black tax, Monica, 34, married with one child, an education policy researcher in Maryland, says, at this meeting, there was this look that made me think that they were colluding against me in some way. My conversation was with one of them, and I kind of just had to get through it, just to get the information. As I was leaving the meeting, it felt negative. I went to my office and cried because I felt like I have to armor up just to do my work. And I love the work that I do. But when you must work around people that you have to put up a barrier to protect yourself from them coming at you a certain way, it gets exhausting. Some days working with them is fine. Some days it's like you can feel that they are ready to throw rocks at anything you say. You always must be on your P's and Q's, cross your T's, dot your I's. You know the Black tax. You must do like 150%. Now I'm doing 200% for people who, in my opinion, are below me. They are mediocre, but they have the attention of the higher ups. So yeah, working in that environment can be draining. And actually, Monica was a research analyst at this institute. And the colleagues that she was talking about, the two women that were giving her, having her being a part of her hostile work experience, were not a lead researcher at the institute. And so she felt like she had to defer to people who were below her position just to do her job. An example of gendered racism in the workplace by mostly white colleagues. Aware of their partner's experiences with gendered racism with employment and financial strains, middle-class Black mothers lean into their identities as wives and mothers to accommodate or become sympathetic to their husband's experiences. So not only did they think about their experiences at work, they also thought about what their husbands went through at work, or aware of their husband's experiences or cohabiting partners. For example, Naomi's husband works away from home about 2 hours. And in these separate quotes, Naomi shares the impact her husband's work life is having on him and the choice she makes to accommodate his current work reality. We are waiting right now for a job that is here down the street from where I work, seeing if they say yes. It's really hard because he's a Black male engineer in a very white male subfield. It's really been hard for him because he is also a football coach at the collegiate level. He will love to stay in that as well, but that's also hard to penetrate into more so here. And it's wearing on him too, his mental capacity, but also he is missing family time. I know it's beating him up inside. So I try to be very empathetic toward what he is going through. He listens to me because he understands that I'm doing all this stuff and he acknowledges that. I know you are doing all of this. He tries to help out as much as he can. Like I said, he helps me prep for the week ahead so I can have an easier week. And then there's Lisa, who's an engineer and she makes more money than her cohabiting partner, Joshua. Lisa does things in the home, in this quote, where she accommodates the challenges that Joshua has with work. And she works to soften these feelings of emasculation by piling on more housework and childcare demands. My thing I think about is, am I emasculating by having this whatever career title? People presume it's pretentious crap, that's what it is. But people assign these things with things like, oh, if you are an engineer, you must be this and that and the third. It just so happens that I make this much money. I worry about emasculating him in that way. And so I think I overcompensate by being like in the kitchen or making sure that things are done, making sure that they are clean, the dishes. So that's the negative part of what I think about. And so what is this piling on? Mothers are taking on more housework and childcare as a response to their husband's experiences with employment, including financial strain. Although women do this, they also recognize the inequality embedded within their choices. First quote examples with Lorraine, 55, and married with one son in IT. Her husband is currently navigating unemployment, which is a common experience among middle-class Black men as well, unemployment and underemployment. Lorraine says, I do the grocery shopping about once a week, and I usually do that myself. I probably would say grocery shopping 2 hours. That's like going to the store and buying everything, maybe going to Costco and then coming home. And then it has to be put away. I have it in my mind that if I shop for it, they should be able to put it away, but I never say that. So I end up putting it away most of the time. And then Naomi, who previously spoke about how her husband does help with prepping and she's understanding, she still expresses her frustration with having to pile on more, especially when it comes to the bathrooms. Naomi says, he would say he does do certain things. I feel like I have to ask him to do it. So the bathroom is always a big issue because if he cleans the bathroom, he doesn't clean them the way I would like him to. He doesn't want to clean them because he knows he's not going to meet my standards. But I'm just like, it is simple. I think it's simple. Maybe I am just making too much of it. You know, I wish that was more of a split duty because they don't get done unless I have time to do them. And they look a mess if I don't do them. That's the main tension, just cleaning up in general. I feel like he's really good at the kitchen and he can get that kitchen done, get it all nice and sparkly and extra. But if you have any other part of our house, good luck. He's not going to do it. And this is a common trend among all the women participants, where they said, my husband's really good at this one household task, but if you ask him to do everything else, good luck. It might not come out right. And so why does this matter? Well, middle-class Black mothers' experiences with and responses to gendered racism in their lives and their partners' lives is critically important to interrogate, as their responses intersect with their identities as mothers and wives. This is because Black women, research is showing, tend to view caring for the home as a form of resistance against systemic racism. Despite the gender inequity built into piling on household and childcare responsibilities, many Black women may decide to bear the brunt of gender inequality at home and in communities because it is easier to manage Black men than white supremacy. The persistent racially charged attacks on Black women and men's humanity by police, work organizations, the financial wealth gap between Black and white Americans, and many other social problems combined with an unbending patriarchal structure has contributed to constrained choices among Black women to contend with work and family life. When we see headlines such as COVID has set women back 10 years, we must ask ourselves, how does this vary by race and class and other intersecting identities? If the goal is to realize and improve the quality of life for all women, then we must each recognize that what affects one group of women stands in the way for all women to realize an equal and equitable livelihood. And I extend that to say within the US nation state and globally. Can we imagine a future where women's issues, including making room for all women and not just a few? Thank you. I look forward to questions. I have a lot to say.
I want to confirm your couples were all Black male, Black women couples. Okay.
Yes, all Black men, Black women couples. Mhm.
I'd be interested, I know you're not probably going there, to know what the response is with interracial couples too, which is a completely different thing with Black women. And that'd be very interesting. I mean, just thinking about it.
Yes, that would be. Oh, I'll add that to my research.
You know, I mean.
Well,
I have a question. I'm wondering if you'd be willing, and it's okay if you're not, what your own personal experience, what your lived experience is with this as a woman who's really, you know, moved on in your own life and your education, your support, your challenges, if you're willing.
Yes, yes, of course. So this is actually going to be at the beginning of my book when I finally get that out there. I grew up in a women-headed home, single mother household. I grew up seeing my mom just do everything. And I also grew up with my mom trying to date or experience partnerships, and it was just very challenging at the same time. And so, and I didn't understand like why it was challenging for her, like trying to manage it all or trying to have a partner. And then she passed away when I was 18 years old, my freshman year of college. And the reason why she passed, her doctor said, your mother just had a lot on her plate and she had a stress-induced heart attack. She also had a lot of other health issues going on, diabetes, high blood pressure. And she was one of the only Black woman lead charge nurse at the hospital that she worked at. And she experienced, we're from rural North Carolina, so there's a lot of like racial hostility that she experienced in the workplace, then coming home, trying to cook, clean, manage children activities. It's a lot of stress, right? The gender, and so that experience led me to where I was like, I went to Spelman College, a historically Black college for women for undergrad. I was learning about feminism, Black feminist theory, and I just kept thinking about my mother's experience. And I thought, well, maybe if she just would have been married, it would have been different. She would have had more help. And then as I got older and I researched, that's not necessarily the case. And so as I'm currently not, I identify as a heterosexual cisgendered woman. I'm currently not married and I don't have children. But I will say my research definitely has led me in the direction where I would say, you know, it's important to hold men accountable as much as possible. And what that means, holding them accountable, because women are saddled with doing so much. And, you know, one of my participants was like, I couldn't sleep at night if I don't address issues in terms of like inequality at work. Imagining with people you have an intimate relationship with, like your husband and your children, right? So we have to do better. We have to continue doing this research because it could lead to costing women their lives. It could lead to death if we don't deal with it.
I thank you for that. And I can say I'm a white woman who was a divorced single mom and I'm a retired nurse. So I get it. And I didn't have color and all the rest of that as part of my experience. So I can't imagine. And I'm sorry for your loss, but it sounds like it's moved you in a way that we're all benefiting from. So thank you.
I would love to have you talk about the book behind you there.
Oh, yes. So our book, Intersectionality, I'll go grab it too.
Tell us how this came to be.
So my colleagues and I, we wrote Intersectionality, We Make Room for All. We are sociologists by training, women of color, 2 Black women and 1 Korean woman. And we were at the Women's March. We go to the Women's March all the time and we're like, you know, they're talking about equal pay, which is important, or Me Too, but it's still coming from this very white feminist framing. It's not intersectional. But the word intersectionality was on some, you know, like what do you call this, protest posters. So we were like, I wonder if people really know what intersectionality means or how it's used, right? It's a buzzword. It's like everyone knows it because of Kimberly Crenshaw and it's just all around. But do people really truly understand the importance of this? And so we said, why don't we write a children's book about intersectionality and break it down to the youngest population, children, and then make it fun. And then once you reach children, you reach teachers, you reach parents, you end up educating entire households. And so that's how we decided to write this book. We use Black and decolonial feminist theory, intersectionality to talk about safety for children, and that safety for one child is going to be different for another child at their intersections. All our characters are either girls and 8 girls and 1 non-binary who uses they, them pronouns. So we teach huge concepts that are in the academy to basically young kids in elementary school and older. The book grows with you. So I can go on about it.
Very good. And it's available on Amazon because I bought it, but also at our local bookstores, I'm hoping as well.
Yes, it's available on Amazon and it's available in local bookstores, as well as through our press, daughter press, and I can put that in the.
Why don't we put that in the chat? That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking that the partnering experience across races is pretty similar. And being an older lady, I was kind of hoping it was getting better for the younger generation, but it doesn't sound like it. It is. We still got to drag these men along and teach them, and they're not mind readers. And, you know, you do have to ask for help. But the one thing I know I've learned is that, unfortunately, when you ask for a job to be done, you have to accept it the way they do it. And that is probably the hardest part.
Yes, exactly. And right. So it's just like, and that's part of, I'm glad you brought that up, Kathy, because I agree, right? It's like, you know, in the data, and I started reading stuff from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I'm like, oh, well, things really haven't changed much, you know, which speaks to the embeddedness of patriarchy, right, in our society, and just the latitude men are given in family and in work organizations as well. And so the idea of also, but we're in the space now where it's like, yeah, it's like you got to accept, even though it's not done the way you want it to be done, at least it's getting done. An idea that I'm playing around with in a paper is organized anxiety, right? What is, you know, going into the more psychology, because in sociology, we don't do these things, anxiety, we don't get on that level. It's all about the structure, which is great, but what I wonder, women's response by overcompensating or staying silent, how much is that just trying to find something to control? It's like, well, I'm a mother, like I'm a wife, like in a world where there's a lot of uncertainty and lack of control. It's like there's a limit to your control in the work organization. And then as a woman, and then as a woman of color, right? And then in the home, well, I'll just do this because so much of your life is just not, you can't control. You can't control if the police are going, if your life is going to end, if you have an encounter with the police. You can't control being stopped and frisked. You can't control being followed in a store when you go. You can't control any of that. But maybe I can control what's going on in this house as as a mother, and how anxiety of just about life is wrapped up into some of those decisions, for sure.
Well, I know I had it easy because I didn't have that issue. So my gosh, I can't even imagine. There's a comment here on the chat. How are you getting your book to the state education leaders and to the federal education leaders to help start this discussion?
Thank you. So we've done readings with some schools where a lot of private schools has our book, and some public schools. Getting at the state level has been kind of hard, I guess, because they already have their curriculum set. They're like, oh no, this is what we're using and packaging. So we're still working on that. But that said, we're actually about to gear up and do a workshop with this with a school in Minneapolis and Indiana. Their schools, public schools, doing a workshop on intersectionality and why this work is important over the summer. And so that's something that we're doing. But we are pressing to get this at the federal level because we think it's an important book. A lot of kids, when we on classroom visits, have said, "Thank you so much for writing this book." And they just opened up about their experiences in the classroom, being one of few or not being able to express themselves or seeing themselves in children's books. And we're like, man, that was our experience as kids, and this is still a thing. And teachers have been reaching out to us saying, thank you so much for this work.
I was wondering if presenting to local school districts, because I know a couple of our local school districts are trying to formulate diversity education, which would include exactly intersectionality.
Well, maybe our 3 branches could buy a couple copies and spread the wealth. They could give them and donate them in Camarillo, in Simi Valley, and in Thousand Oaks. And that would be very appropriate for our mission for equity and education for everyone. And then there's one more comment. Your reflection on the level of exhaustion for Black women is so powerful to understand. And I think we can all say that. So true, so true.
Thank you.
Let me see if we have any more. Oh, have you sent a book to Tony Thurman, our state superintendent?
No, we should do that.
And he's a Black man. He's a Black man, so
Sure
hopefully he could
is.
be even more receptive.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. See,
Good.
there's the book right there. Good job, Gloria.
Thank
I
you.
think that LaToya, you should send your book to Gail King at CBS and get on the national news with your book.
Oh, that's a good idea, Pat.
Yeah, I just think it needs to get started at the top. Send it to President Biden, somebody that, or actually send it to
Yeah.
Dr. Jill Biden.
Jill Biden, that's a great idea.
And she would help you, I'm sure.
Okay, if we have no further questions, let us thank our 2 ladies very much.
Thank
Wonderful
you so
presentation.
much. Thank
So
you.
enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn the meeting back over to Pat.